Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a third submission by Thomas of his horse Hombredon. Now, Hombredon is just coming back. They've had a little bit of a winter layoff, as many people have had. As you can see, they don't have an indoor arena here, so he's just starting them that, though they said it was a pretty mild winter for them. They're in Belgium, by the way. But starting off, he's looking very good. Doesn't seem to have lost a lot of muscle over his break. And right away, he's getting into a very good and rhythmic, active working walk, which is what we want to look for. Thomas does a very good job with this horse, and I suggest everyone pay close attention to this one. Now that is just about right. You can see his pole is up. He's keeping that steady working walk, but he hasn't shortened the neck or pulled the neck higher. That's what we're looking for. So once again, beginning to understand that collection has nothing to do with how high you have the head and neck. It has to do with what the back end is doing. You actually could have a horse in collection and have its neck stretched all the way down if the horse were fit enough to do it, which means it could stay lowered through the joints of the hind legs and still be stretched completely out forward. So getting that in our minds, which Thomas is doing beautifully here, you can see how he's not shortening the neck at all, and by virtue of that, he has a perfectly rhythmic walk. And that's what we're always looking for. Remember, the rhythm is what guides us. You will all hear me say that many, many, many times. So a ride without rhythm is like music without rhythm. And then if your horse is hollow, it's like music out of tune. Let's think of it that way. Someone once said about the late 1800s trainer James Phillis, who had horses doing all kinds of strange and spectacular movements, but what they said about him was it was interesting music, but it was played on horribly out-of-tune instruments. And you see the old pictures of Phyllis, and the mouths of the horses were always gaping open, and he was always hanging on the curb rein. And yes, he got them to do some amazing things, but they were always hollow and looked stiff and like they were resisting. So that's not what we're looking for at all here, and that's not what we're looking for in dressage. Remember, dressage is all about doing the best thing for the horse. That should be at the heart of every real dressage riders, at the heart of their heart, so to speak. But look how beautiful this is as he comes across here. There's no change in the rhythm as he changed the bend, and how beautifully he went from one stride to the other, one bend from the other, rather. And that's just about right. Once again, there's no compression in the neck. And I love how he's keeping the horse to rather wide turns. Here's just exactly what he could do at this level of the walk. But look how the walk like this is so rhythmic and beautiful to watch, even though, you know, it's not a big spectacular movement, but look how beautiful the horse looks walking along like that in that perfect rhythm. You know, I very much have seen a parallel between, you know, how good trainers are and how much they understand the walk. Because a good trainer understands that the walk, as Nuno Oliveira used to say, is where we explain everything to the horse. We get everything going in the walk before we move on, as we like to think, is there's really no point in getting out of a walk if the horse isn't over its back in the walk. It's just going to be hollow in the trot, and you're going to create other problems. So once you learn these guidelines to train by, and the back letting you guide you through your training work, that is, if the horse is not engaged in the back, we must be all concerned with that and nothing else until it is. So if we lose the horse over its back, we must go back and regain that before we go on trying to do more difficult exercises. But this is all excellent work. As I said, everyone should really watch Thomas's rides. He does a beautiful job. It's very soft. Look how quiet his legs are. They're all in the right position. He's stretching up quite nicely. His heel is hanging underneath his hip, just as we would like to see. And here he stretches down. So you can see how he's also not always keeping the horse in that higher frame. Coming back to the stretch, this is what we all do throughout our workouts. You know, a horse is just like you. You go to the gym, you just don't do one exercise endlessly for an hour until your muscle's so fatigued you can't stand up. Well, that's what people do to horses all the time. They just assume that they're big, strong animals. But the fact is their backs are quite weak and require quite a deal of work to get them strong enough to carry a human being without damage. Now, you can clearly see with this horse that there's no hole behind the saddle on this horse. So that tells us this horse has been working over its back for a while, and everything is developing beautifully. So even coming back, as he said, he had a little layoff over the winter, but he comes back and you pretty much start where you left off. The horse might be a little fresh the first day or so, but you don't lose anything in training, really. They come right back to where they were if you've done the training correctly. But beautiful in that leg yield. Notice how beautifully rhythmic that was. He stayed flexed at the pole throughout, moved away from his inside leg. And what a beautifully relaxed horse this is. This is what you want it to be. You know, you never want to ride a tense horse. Always remember that a tense horse is a dangerous horse, and we see far and away too many accidents, caused by tense horses these days. We see a lot of people are sidelined by these dressage trainers who get on and beat these horses all up and get them all aggravated, and get this fancy kind of show ring trot out of them that really has nothing to do with dressage. And it impresses a beginner who doesn't know what they're looking at. But then the problem is they end up getting sidelined because they're not able to ride like that. Let me just say this, if nothing else, folks, to understand that a correctly trained horse is easy to ride. It is not difficult to ride. That's the point of training, is to make the horse easier to ride. So if you've bought yourself a nice horse and you put it in training with somebody and you're able to ride it when you buy it, and a month later you can't even get on the horse, there's something wrong with the situation you're in here. So many people would be better off training their horses themselves, as we see so many people on our website doing, than sending them off to trainers just so they can get them aggravated and hollow and broken to the third vertebrae. So again, it doesn't take a Herculean feat of strength to train a horse correctly. That's the point of correct training. We're the brains instead of the brawn, and that's the whole idea of classical dressage. Is that, we want to outsmart them, not outstrengthen them, so to speak. Really good leg yield from the long side that time, just what we're looking for. And that's exactly the order they should come. So you notice that first he leg yielded from the center to the outside. Now he's doing his leg yields from the outside to the inside. Very, very nice. And you notice there a little bit of loss of rhythm there once in a while, but he just immediately lets the neck back out and he's able to regain the rhythm. That's exactly what we're looking for. And you could have just about put a metronome on this horse from the start of this lesson. You notice how it just keeps flowing, and that's what we want to do. Your ride on a horse should not be, imagine if you were riding from point A to point B and you had 20 miles to go and you constantly stopped, or went backwards or whatever the case may be. The point is to go efficiently forward, for the horse to engage efficiently under its body. Remember, once again, that's what forward means, is to engage forward underneath itself, not to run forward. But look how beautiful this walk is. You can imagine even just doing this. If you were out on a trail, this is exactly what you'd want to do. Remember, there's no difference between riding outside and inside a ring, or in an indoor arena and an outdoor arena. It's still riding the same horse. We have to do all the same things. We're just doing it in a different environment. So really good stretch here as he comes back to that stretch in the walk. And notice how, every time he does come back to the stretch, look how lovely and longer the horse's neck gets, and the effect that it has on the hindquarters. How the hindquarters keep stepping more deeply under the horse's body. Now we see how this horse just holds his tail out from his body. That's exactly what you want to see. If you see a horse and his tail is clamped down between the legs, and there was actually a device on the market some years back that actually tied the tail of the horse to the mouth, if you can believe that, underneath and between the horse's legs, and it was supposed to be an engager, So beware of all these devices out there in the world, folks. Learn how to ride correctly, and that's all you really need to do. So you can see that a correctly trained horse, when it's lifting its back, also lifts its tail out. And once again, that's what saddlebred people were trying to imitate by breaking their horses' tails, because their horses were hollow and the tails hang straight down. So they started breaking the tails so they stood up. Like you see this horse's tail standing out from its body. That shows you a horse is working over its back. And that's what you want to see, that slight lift away of the tail from the body, not the tail hanging just down like a limp rag. So this tells me that this horse's back is quite engaged in what he's doing here. Look how beautiful this stretch is. And just like the walk, he's gone right into a beautiful active stretch into the contact. He's never once asked the horse to do anything it was incapable of doing. He had a few little maybe hesitant steps in a couple of the leg yields there, but it went right back forward again, let that neck back out, and he was able to regain his rhythm. And that's what we want to do. Remember, make rhythm your goal, like music. It is good to ride with music in your head if you can. I know I do. I don't even have to have a stereo on, but I am a musician also, so it makes a difference. But put some music on and ride to it and see if you can keep a beat. Or even better yet, if you want to, put a metronome on. But that's what we have to develop. Every rider has to kind of become, the conductor, so to speak, whose job it is to keep the rhythm of the orchestra. Well, the same thing is true with horses. Great job here. Look how beautifully this horse is swinging through. And once again, you will see people who will criticize what we are doing here in this style of riding and say, oh, you're just running around on the forehand. But I challenge you to take your finger, and block the horse's neck and just look at the body of this horse and tell me that it's on his forehand. Because if you shorten this horse and bring his head up, it would be on the forehand. But this horse is swinging beautifully and even starting to show a little thrust. That is, it's lifting itself up. Remember, that's what ultimately has to happen. As the horse strengthens over the 2-year period of time in the horse's first work. Remember, it takes 2 years to put a foundation on a horse, whether you're starting with one that's 20 or you're starting with one that's 2. It takes the same amount of time. Because in that process, the withers has to actually pull up through the shoulders, and that's what all this stretching does. So it puts the horse into a more uphill frame. It actually stretches the withers up through the shoulders. For a good explanation of this scientific study of this, I highly recommend the Gerd Hirschman books to take a look at if you'd like to see somebody who's actually proven this. Now, however, once again, I didn't invent any of this, folks. All this knowledge has been out there for a long, long time. It was thought up by minds better than mine many, many hundreds of years ago. But unfortunately, we tend to get away with it. The show ring and the rush for ribbons has made people push forward too fast. Now, beautiful, look at this, how lovely and stretched that is. And look how the top line, you can see the top of this horse's neck when he's stretched all the way out. Even when he's stretched all the way down, you see how inflated the top part of the neck is. That is the top line muscles, and that's what we want to see. A little bit of a lengthening stride there, that's really nice, and coming back to the corner and slowing a little bit. That's exactly what we want to see, just like that. It wasn't anything too extreme. And once again, another nice lengthening right there. And you see how he lets the frame out a little bit. That's what we almost must do all the time. So as the horse lengthens, remember in a lengthening, the horse is lengthening its entire body, which is different than doing an extended trot. In the extended trot, the horse stays much more uphill and comes through a little more from behind. In a lengthening stride, we actually let the horse lengthen its entire frame. But even in extended trot, we have to let the neck come forward a little bit. And that's exactly what he's doing here, and that's really good. Very nice, and you can see he gets a little more push off the ground. Once again, when I say that, you can kind of see how the front end elevates a little bit. And then he lets him back down into stretch, exactly what we want to do. Do a few exercises, come back to the stretch. Remember that when we come back to the stretch, we let the blood flow back through the muscles. Just like yourself, if you go to the gym, you don't do one exercise for an hour to the point that your muscle never gets any blood flow. There has to be blood flow in order for the muscle to bring the nutrients to the muscle, for the muscle to grow. So that was wonderful trot work. And just about the right level for this horse, I would say, in terms of the level of his head and neck throughout that work. Coming back into a working walk there, very nice. In fact, this is a little more elevated walk here. That's really good. Now that's an excellent working walk there. That's coming beautifully, just like that. And we must all fight, at the highest levels right now. There's a big debate going on. The FEI and the USDF are all considering, which is amazing that they would even consider this, considering removing the walk from the Grand Prix test, because all these people who roker their horses and train them in improper methods, of course, the biggest proof of that is just seeing them walk. When you see a Grand Prix horse and it's lateral walking, it tells you right there how it's been trained. That it's been forced against the hand and it's hollow. So we have this big push going on right now for the people who ride that way, and many of them are very wealthy and have a lot of power and control, and they are trying to get the walk taken out of Grand Prix on the ground that it takes too long. Well, that's completely silly. The walk says more about the training of the horse almost than anything else, interestingly enough, once you know how to see that. So we mustn't let them remove that as an obstacle to their training methods. If their training methods were sound, their horses would be able to walk. Another good transition back into the trot here. Very nice. Now, just like in the walk there, he's brought him up a little bit now after that first warm-up work. And you can see the horse struggles just a little bit at that level. You can see him struggling with the bridle just a little bit. So that looks like he needs to have his neck. It's looking like it's almost too high for him right there. So once again, as he lets him right down, there he goes. He just lets that neck lower a little bit, and all of a sudden the trot starts becoming more rhythmic again, and the horse stops fighting the bit. So that's exactly what you see. If you're in a fight with your horse at the front end, that tells you you're trying to force the horse in, And whenever you're on your horse, if you feel him, if they start tugging at the bridle like you saw this one when you bring the head up and that sort of stuff, you could just see how it clamped him up a little bit to be up that high. He wasn't quite ready for that. But that doesn't mean that we try it. So once again, remember in this method, we're not going to just get on and just ride the horse just out and stretched for a year. We're going to keep every day. As soon as I get the horse stretched all the way down, I'm going to start trying to bring him up. Some horses, depending on their conformation and how much they've been damaged, take greater or lesser amount of time. But this is better here. Now he's brought him up a little bit and he's got him a little more stabilized here, so that's quite good. Very nice. Short period of sitting trot there. Now you can see he's just a little bit behind the vertical there. So we would like to either let him stretch out there a little bit more if we can. I think that's the issue here, just letting him have a little more rep. I like there, that's better. Now this horse does look like a horse to me that was flexed a little back in the neck before you got him. So I think that's a little bit of your problem there. Remember when we ever have horses that have been broken at the third vertebrae, that is, when you see a horse and its neck looks like it goes up and then flattens out about a foot behind the ears, that's a horse that's been over-flexed in the neck. And that means the tendons that are actually holding, the tendons and ligaments that actually hold the actual vertebrae themselves together have been separated, have been stretched. So the horse has like a kink in its wiring, so to speak. That's why it's so important that we get rid of that. And it usually takes about a year to get rid of that broken vertebrae in the neck. Not that they're really broken, they're just overflexed, but it looks like a break. Once again, a nice lengthening there. Very good. I like how you're slowing him back to stretching up to come back and slow. And you see he got a little bit out of balance there. And Thomas does a great job of just balancing him again here. There, good. Once again, he looks a little bit unlevel. I'm not sure if that's footing or he was just a little uncomfortable in his mouth there. But once he gets it going, it's quite nice. So once again, it's never going to be absolutely perfect every time. No matter what horse we're riding, we're going to have moments that it's not going to be so good. But the trick is, do we recognize those moments? Good sitting trot there. Now notice he was able to sit to the trot in that time and there was no change in the trot. Now the neck is out a little bit longer than it was before when he tried to go into a little higher level of a working trot. But by letting him drop the neck a little bit more forward, he's able to do that and sit to the trot and there's no change in the balance. And look how beautifully Thomas is sitting up straight. That's really nice. That's what we want to see right there. You can actually see the wave. I mean, imagine the wave. Like, look at the back of this horse and how he's sitting, and imagine how it's just lifting him and carrying him forward. And that's what allows us to sit straight. Unfortunately, what happened in dressage is that people got the idea that they needed to sit straight up and down, which you do on a horse that's back is round. But the problem is, when a back is hollow, it's almost impossible to sit like that unless the horse is slowed down and its gait's all cramped, which is why we see so many sway back dressage horses these days, because they've been slowed down. They've just been made to have their knees lift up like a saddlebred. That's not dressage riding. Once again, really nice. I like that last little lengthening there because the horse actually stretched a little bit and that was really even that time. Once again, good sitting trot, didn't interrupt the stride. That's what we're looking for. So once again, we would never even want to sit on a horse that's back is not round. And just remember that any horse can only sustain that for a certain period of time. The back gets tired. And that was nice. You could see there he tried to do a little lengthening. It was a little bit more than the horse could do there, and he kind of broke his rhythm there. But right away he came back and let the neck back out and let him back into a longer frame, and he was able to recapture the rhythm. So really good there, and a nice transition back to the working walk. Once again, as I said, it's never going to be perfect, but the point is, do you recognize when you make a mistake? Like when you're playing music, do you hear those bad notes that you're playing? Some people don't hear the bad notes, and many riders don't hear the bad notes that they're playing. If only we could play it back for them. So once again, back to a very good working walk. And you'll notice with Thomas that, sometimes when he's riding in the stretch, he lets his hands go wide as we do, just so we can keep up with the slack. And other times he's riding in a more equitation position, for instance, when he was more up and had the horse in a sitting trot. And I like how he came behind the motion. The horse got a little sticky there, and you see how he came behind the motion a little bit, got him ahead of his leg, and then came back up on the ball. Because that's the thing we have to do. Remember, the horse's back is hollow. If we sit straight up and down, we're putting the pressure straight down into that hole. So what we have to learn to do when the horse is hollow is to come back, lift our chest, and come behind the motion a little bit, send the wave up underneath us, and then straighten your back up on top of the horse once you feel the ball replace. And we even come back and you have to tighten your abdominal muscles, even close your thigh a little bit into the saddle to lighten your weight. Because remember, we're trying to get the horse to lift its back. So think logically about what we're trying to do. Why would you push down into something that you're trying to lift up? It makes no sense, right? Well, that's how it works with horses. If you push down into its back, the back is just going to get sore and more hollow. You have to wait for the back to come up underneath you, then you can sit on it. Once you start training in this way, why it may sound like it takes a long time, but I see people all the time buying very, very expensive horses, and I see them 2 years from now, and they're actually worse than they were when they bought it because they've spent so much time with the vet wasting all this time. Whereas if they'd gotten a horse and trained it correctly, they'd still have a horse to ride, and it would still be going forward. That's the real key thing to remember, that, the scientific minds that studied dressage for many, many, many years at great schools like the Spanish Riding School, Mafra in Portugal, the Cadre Noir in France, these were the greatest minds in the world were working on how to train horses, and because countries depended on it, economies depended on it, armies and soldiers depended on it. The world moved on horseback for many, many years. So we really needed to know how best to do it. So anybody who thinks they've invented anything new with horses just simply doesn't know history, because everything has been tried. Beautiful working walk here. Now you can see that he's been able to bring the frame up here a little bit, and by virtue of it, you see what he's lost a little bit in forward swing. We have a little higher step in the horse, but once again, it's still rhythmic. The horse is still is still flexing at the pole rather. And look what a nice foamy mouth this horse has. That tells me, and once again, that's different. When we see horses whose mouths are being tied shut, when you go to horse shows and you see horses that look like they're frothing and their whole chests are covered with foam, if you look closely, you'll see that their nose bands are too tight because they're riding their horses hollow, so they have to tie the horse's mouth shut to keep it from opening up. That's how the whole tight nose band thing began. So remember, you should always be able to get 2 fingers in under a drop noseband and under the noseband itself. It's not there to tie the horse's mouth shut. What a drop noseband is for is so that the horse opens its mouth, it lifts the bit up in the horse's mouth and pulls the bit up so the horse can't get his tongue under it. That's what it's for, not to tie the horse's mouth shut. Once again, a beautiful stretch after that. This is such a great ride. I almost feel like doing another one and just putting it to music, but I suggest that maybe you all do. Just put on some music and along with this tape and watch it go, and look how beautifully rhythmic every step has been, and every time he's lost the rhythm, he's come right back. So once again, this is really exemplary work from Thomas. Thomas, I hope you are helping some other people in your area, because you guys are doing a wonderful job with your horses. And it really is not a big argument to classical dressage if people have ever seen it. The problem is most people have never been on the back of a horse that's actually working round. People say round all the time. Every trainer I hear these days is talking about round, but what they're talking about is pulling the head and neck over in most cases. Once again, back to another good working trot. Does look like he's getting a little tired now to me towards the end here. Not quite swinging as much after that walk. So this is where we want to start thinking about, with our workout. Now this is a good shoulder in here, or a leg yield into a little bit of a shoulder in. Very nice, good rhythm in that. And once again, the right correct position of the head and neck, not too high. That's what we always want to look at. What's the back end doing? As an experiment, folks at home, pull your horse's head up, videotape yourself with the horse in a stretch, and then pull its head up and videotape yourself and see what the horse's back end looks like. You'll see that it won't be moving anymore. So we must get out of the idea of looking at the horse's head and neck, and that's what so many people do, and so many so-called horse sports are kind of nothing more than that, positioning of the head and neck with very little movement. Look how beautifully this horse is swinging again over his back. Now in the next workout, the next time I see you, Thomas, I'd like to see you begin some half passes where we begin to move into the direction of the bend. So your leg yields are good, your shoulder ends are good. So at the walk, I'd like to see you add in the half pass. And then beginning to do a little more sitting trot work, both in straight lines, a little bit more. I think he can sustain that. and only just very gradually bringing his head up. Now that was a good one right there as an example. You could see how he kind of got a little stuck there in his neck. He needed to be a little bit longer, and how that kind of shortened him a little bit right there. So remember our goal. Now, not to say that every time you do it, you're going to be able to do this, because we're certainly going to have times that's going to shorten up. But once again, it's whether you recognize that or not. That's what we must do, is recognize when it's going wrong and quickly go back to doing it right again. And once again, never trying to fight. You notice how Thomas is doing all this beautiful work with the horse. Not once has he fought with its mouth, or held it back in any kind of way. It's just been forward and flowing, and that's what real riding looks like. If you're spending all your time fighting with your horse, or your trainer's spending all his time or her time fighting with your horse or theirs, you need to find a new trainer. So we tell people all the time, if everybody starts turning their backs on these trainers that are roll-curring horses and draw reining them till their necks are broken and these kind of things, start turning your backs on these people. Even the show ring, the same kind of thing. The judges need to start being much more severe about this, or we will lose this beautiful sport. But happily, we have people showing the way now, and thanks to YouTube and things like this, people can actually begin around the world to see. When I was trying to learn this, I had to travel to Portugal to even see a horse that was beginning to be working over its back, because there weren't any videos I could watch of it anywhere. And still pictures just don't really tell the same story. Once again, very good in that leg yield. Once again, we can see how it slowed him just a little bit, but not bad. So once again, in this next workout with you, I'd like to see you begin some work in half pass. After your shoulder ins, just maybe turning down the center line and half passing back to the rail. That is, remember in the half pass, we're talking about maintaining the bend. In the leg yield, the horse is moving away from the bend. In the shoulder in, the horse is moving away from the bend. So as you see here in this leg yield, he's bending right, but he's moving left. So in the half pass, it's much more difficult, and the horse must begin to move into the direction of the bend, which means we have to be able to hold the bend a little more with our inside leg. So the horse has to be able to listen by that point to both legs at the same time rather than just kind of one. The dialogue becomes a little more complicated at that time. But once again, this is all really good work. Now, see, with that one, that got a little more quick than it did stretching. As I said, he looks like he's starting to tire a little bit to me here, a little bit. But this has been really good work. And so when you feel your horse starting to tire, we always want to go on a little bit more than what they want to do. Once again, you can see how he struggles. He's struggling there just a little bit towards the end there and struggling to get in it. But you're doing a good job. Once again, you get him off your leg and you get him forward again. But as I was saying, we always want to do a little more than the horse wants to do, but only a little more. And that was a really good transition into canter. And once again, this horse is cantering over its back. See how beautifully he can stretch into the contact, and the horse is holding itself up. That's the whole idea of real training, is we're training. That's where lightness comes from. The only way a horse can be light in real movement, is to be holding itself up. If you hold it up with your hands, it will never be light. So beautiful stretch in this canter. That's exactly what we want to see. Absolutely fantastic. And just so remember that beyond this, then we want to see the same things. We want to see leg yields and shoulder ins would be the next place to go. Look at a beautiful stretch in that and a lovely transition back to trot. Exemplary work once again. So after everybody, after you listen to this critique, if you are listening to it, I suggest you just turn off my voice and just watch this. Maybe even put it to some music and watch how beautifully flowing this session is. And that's how we want every session to go. We want it to flow like music. We want it to have cadences and rhythms, and we want it to, sometimes be louder than others, so to speak, and maybe a little more brilliant. And then we come back to something more serene. So once again, another good canter transition. And always relaxed, and once again, proof enough that Thomas is riding with his legs, because he's not fighting with his hands. So when you see riders rather, that have to fight the horse's head down, there's something wrong. They're fighting the front end instead of getting the horse to come through. It's as simple as that, always. So another beautiful, beautiful ride by Thomas. Once again, another great stretch here. That's exactly what you want to see. And even though this horse has had a little time off since we saw him last, he's actually coming back even better than when we saw him the last time, even though he's had a little bit of a winter break. Beautiful stretch in that canter. And look how that back. You can see the ball. Once again, imagine the ball rolling over the ground right there. Try to see the ball as I talk about. Great work, Thomas. Really wonderful. We're hoping to get over to Europe at the end of this year. If people are interested over there, we have a new clinic fund that's going to try to get us to Europe and some other places, and far and away, as we call it, and hopefully meet some of our friends over there over the next year or so. So great work, Thomas. Keep it up. You're an inspiration to everybody. Now that you folks have watched this, just as I said, turn off my voice and just go back and watch this ride. It's beautiful. Great work, Thomas.